The night they took everything from me. They didn't rush it. They didn't lose control. They didn't make it messy. They made it perfect. Carefully staged. Carefully timed. Carefully witnessed. Because this wasn't just about removing me. It was about rewriting me. In front of everyone. And making sure no one would ever question it. The moment I stepped into that dining room, I knew. Not because the room went silent. It didn't. That would have been mercy. Instead, it got louder. Laughter spilling over itself. Glasses clinking too hard. Voices overlapping. Not to hide tension, but to amplify something. Something sharp. Something deliberate. Something waiting. Then someone said it. Not quietly. Not by accident. Oh look, she actually showed up. The timing was perfect. Right as I crossed the threshold. Right as every eye could turn. And they did. All of them. Not confused. Not surprised. Prepared. A few people laughed. Not polite laughter. Not social laughter. The kind of laughter people use when they know they're allowed to. Encouraged to. Protected while doing it. I stopped, just for half a second. But that was enough. Enough to feel it. That shift in the air. That invisible line. Between being invited and being displayed. This wasn't dinner. This was a performance. And I wasn't a guest. I was the subject. The table was already full. 8 seats. 7 people seated. Perfect symmetry. Perfect balance. Except, my chair wasn't tucked in. It wasn't aligned. It was slightly pulled back. Just enough to look wrong. Just enough to say, "You don't belong here." Evelyn Carter was standing. Of course she was. She didn't sit during moments like this. She controlled them. Wine glass in hand. Posture relaxed. Expression warm. If you didn't know her. But I did. And that smile? It wasn't welcome. It was anticipation. She had been waiting for this. Planning it. Shaping it. Rehearsing it. And when our eyes met, she didn't look away. She held it. Just long enough to let me understand. "You're exactly where I want you." "Oh, good," she said. Loud enough for everyone. Clear enough to cut through everything else. "Now we can finally start." Finally. That word landed heavier than anything else. Because it meant this had never been about dinner. Not tonight. Not ever. Daniel didn't look at me. Not when I walked in. Not when I stopped. Not even when his mother spoke. He just sat there. Still. Neutral. Detached. Like I wasn't late. Like I wasn't early. Like I wasn't anything. And somehow, that hurt more than the laughter. More than the setup. More than the room. Because silence from strangers is expected. But silence from someone who once knew you? That's a decision. "Sit," Evelyn said. But this time, it wasn't soft. It wasn't polite. It wasn't even disguised. It was sharp. Direct. Commanding. Public. Every head turned. Not because they were curious. But because they were waiting. Waiting to see if I would obey. So I did. Not because she told me to. But because walking out, I would have ended it too early. And they hadn't earned that yet. The chair was colder than I expected. Or maybe that was just me. Evelyn clapped once. Precisi. Controlled. And instantly, the room went silent. Not gradually. Not naturally. Immediately. That kind of silence only happens when people are used to listening. Used to following. Used to not questioning. "Let's not waste time," she said. And the lawyer stood up. Already prepared. Already holding the documents. Already positioned. Before I even arrived. That was the moment it became undeniable. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't reaction. This was design. "I'll make this very clear," he said. And his tone matched hers. Not neutral. Not objective. Aligned. Over the past 18 months. "Your involvement has resulted in measurable instability." Instability? I cut in. The word tasted wrong. Like it didn't belong to me. Like it had been assigned. Not observed. Heads turned. Faster this time. Sharper. Because that wasn't part of the script. Evelyn didn't like that. I saw it, just for a second. A flicker. Then it disappeared. "Yes," the lawyer continued. Louder now. More assertive. As documented missed responsibilities, inconsistent performance, and poor decision-making That's not true. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Because truth, when spoken in the wrong room, always sounds louder than it should. The room shifted. Not visibly, but enough. Because now, I wasn't playing my role anymore. Evelyn tilted her head. Still smiling. Still composed. But her eyes? Colder now. Sharper. More focused. Oh, sweetheart, she said. Soft enough to feel personal. Loud enough to stay public. We didn't bring you here to debate reality. Laughter. Again. This time louder. Because she had just given permission. That one hit harder than the first. Because this time, it wasn't just mockery. It was framing. Then the screen behind me lit up. And this time, there was no subtlety. No editing to hide intention. No attempt to soften it. Footage. Clips. Moments. Me leaving meetings early. Me sitting in silence. Me looking exhausted. But never why. Never context. Never the part where I held everything together. While they were already planning to remove me, the clips looped. Again, and again, and again. Not evidence. Not truth. A narrative. She's unstable, Evelyn said. Walking. Measured. Around the table. She's emotional. Another step. She's unreliable. Closer. And honestly, she stopped right behind me. Close enough for everyone to feel it. Close enough for her voice to drop just slightly. She was never at our level. Silence. Heavy. Thick. Uncomfortable. But no one spoke. No one defended me. No one even shifted. Because in that room, agreement didn't need words. Daniel, I said. I turned. Slowly. Deliberately. This time, he couldn't avoid it. He looked at me. Finally. And for a second, I saw it. Something human. Something breaking through. Regret. Maybe. Guilt. Possibly. But then, he looked away. And that was it. Not the documents. Not the speech. Not the room. That was the moment. Everything ended. You've already agreed to this, the lawyer said, sliding the papers forward. All assets. All access. All rights. Transferred. Everything. You're stripping me of everything I built. I said. My voice shook. Not from fear. From pressure. From something real, trying to stay contained. No. Evelyn replied immediately. Without hesitation. Without pause. We're correcting a mistake. Then she leaned closer. This time, not to intimidate me. To make sure everyone heard. We're removing you. That did it. Because now, this wasn't business anymore. This was execution. Sign it, she said. Louder now. Sharper. More final. The room leaned in. Not physically, but collectively. Watching. Waiting. Hungry. Because to them, this was the end of me. I looked at the papers. At the signatures already prepared. At the future, they had already decided. I should have walked out. I should have broken the moment. I should have refused. But I didn't. Instead, I picked up the pen. And the room tightened. Just slightly. Because anticipation is louder than action. But they didn't know something. Not one of them. Not Evelyn. Not Daniel. Not even the lawyer. Months before this night, I had already signed something else. Something quieter. Something deeper. Something they never read. Because they never thought I mattered enough to check. So I smiled. Not wide. Not obvious. Just enough. Enough for Evelyn to see it. And for the first time, her expression shifted. Just slightly. And then, I signed. Because this wasn't surrender. This was alignment. Because this wasn't the end. This was positioning. And most importantly, this wasn't loss. This was declaration. Because the moment that pen touched the paper, the story they thought they were writing stopped being theirs and became mine. And this time, it wouldn't stay inside a room. It would spread. Publicly. Irreversibly. Like everything they just did to me. The first thing I did wasn't revenge. It wasn't exposure. It wasn't retaliation. It wasn't even a reaction. It was silence. But not the kind they expected. Not the kind they could dismiss. Not the kind that fades. The kind that lingers. The kind that sits in a room after you've already left it. Because people like Evelyn Carter, they don't fear conflict. They don't fear confrontation. They don't fear anger. They're trained for it. They anticipate it. They control it. But silence? Silence gives them nothing to hold. Nothing to shape. Nothing to crush. So I gave them exactly that. I disappeared. No calls. No message. No emails. No attempts to explain. No attempts to fix things. Nothing. And at first, they loved it. Day one. It felt like victory. I could almost hear her. Good. Evelyn would say. Satisfied. Controlled. She understands. Understands what? Her place. That's what she believed. That I had finally learned it. But silence doesn't mean submission. Sometimes, it means calculation. Day two. Daniel called. Twice. 3 times. By the fourth call, it wasn't casual anymore. By the fifth, it wasn't curiosity. It was pressure. I watched every call. Let it ring. Let it stretch. Let it die. Because every unanswered call does something subtle. It shifts power. By the sixth, he left a message. And this time, he wasn't calm. What did you do? No greeting. No hesitation. No control. Just accusation. I listened to it twice. Not because I needed to, because I wanted to feel it. That shift. That crack. Because that question meant everything. It meant he knew. Not what I did, but that I did something. Day 3. The first fracture appeared. Not loud. Not dramatic. But precise. A payment. Delayed. Not rejected. Not cancelled. Delayed. Inside Carter Holdings. That word doesn't exist. Everything there moves. Clean. Controlled. Until it didn't. At first, they ignored it. Sustainable. Back-end delay. Temporary sync issue. Language. Dismissive. But then, another one. And another. And this time, people started noticing. Phones ringing. Voices rising. Why isn't this clearing? This was approved already? Who signed off on this? Not panic. Not yet. But irritation. And irritation is the beginning of collapse. Because irritation leads to questions. And questions lead to attention. And attention reveals flaws. By mid-morning, the pattern was undeniable. Not a glitch. A sequence. And sequences don't happen by accident. That's when Daniel called again. This time, I answered, not immediately. I let it ring longer than necessary. Because timing is control. What did you do? He snapped. No attempt to hide it now. No performance. Just pressure. I leaned back. Watched the light shift across the window. Let him sit in the silence. Just long enough to feel it. Good morning to you too. I said, stop playing games. His voice was tighter now. Payments are delayed. Approvals aren't clearing. Access is glitching. Sounds like a problem. I replied, you built this system? There it was. Truth. Unfiltered. Because beneath everything, he knew. Whatever was happening, it wasn't random. It was designed, and I was the only one who knew how. I didn't build it alone. I said, that's not the point. No. Of course it wasn't. The point was something he couldn't say. Why are we losing control? And that was exactly where I needed him. Maybe you should ask your mother. I said, silence. Heavy. Immediate. Because that sentence doesn't just shift blame. It shifts fear. Then I ended the call. And this time, he didn't call back. Because now, he wasn't trying to control the situation. He was trying to understand it. And those are two very different things. 2 hours later, the tone inside Carter Holdings changed. Not loudly, but permanently. Why isn't this fixed yet? Who approved this layer? Why is access shifting? That last word spread faster than anything else. Shifting, not broken, not removed, shifting. Because I didn't destroy anything. I just adjusted. What the system listened to. Priorities changed. Permission bon. Responses slowed. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to create friction. And friction turns control into hesitation. By noon, it wasn't a delay anymore. It was a problem. By 1 p.m., it was a pattern. And by 2 p.m., Evelyn Carter called me. Directly. She never did that. People called her. People waited for her. People didn't reach her. Unless something was already wrong. Which meant one thing. Something had reached her. I watched the phone. Let it ring. Longer than before. Because this wasn't just a call. It was pressure. And pressure needs to be measured. Then I answered. Evelyn? No title. No distance. No respect. Just her name. You're still involved. She said. Not a question. A conclusion. I didn't respond. Because silence forces people like her to expose more than they intend to. You signed the release? She continued. A slight shift. Not certainty anymore. Doubt. Yes. I said. I did. A pause. Longer this time. Because now, she was recalculating. Rebuilding the structure in her head. Trying to find the gap. You left something behind? She said. There it was. Recognition. Not full understanding. But enough. I left a lot of things behind. I replied. I let the silence stretch. On purpose. Silence. Different this time. Sharper. Because now, we weren't negotiating. We were revealing. You'll come in. She said. Not asking. Positioning. No. The word landed harder than anything else. Because no one said no to Evelyn Carter. Not in meetings. Not in contracts. Not in family. Not ever. You don't understand your position. She said. Her voice changed. Thinner. More precise. Less absolute. Oh. I understand it perfectly. I said. And that's exactly why I'm not coming. That's when it happened. The shift. Not loud. Not visible. But final. Control. Moved. You're making a mistake. She said. No. I replied. You did? And then, I ended the call. Inside Carter Holdings. The noise didn't stop. It multiplied. Transactions slowing. Approvals conflicting. Systems hesitating. Not failing. Worse, thinking. And systems aren't supposed to think. That afternoon, Evelyn stopped dismissing it. She started hunting. Locks pulled. Access traced. Layers opened. Faster. Deeper. More aggressively. Until they found it again. That layer. Hidden. Integrated. Untouchable. Without consequences. And attached to it, my name. For the first time, since that dinner, Evelyn Carter paused. Not for long, but long enough, and people like her? They don't survive pauses. Meanwhile, I sat in the same cafe, same table, same corner. But this time, I wasn't the one being watched. They were, because this wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was alignment. This was positioning. This was pressure. Applied slowly, deliberately, irreversibly. And the best part? I had barely touched anything. By the fourth day, it stopped being explainable. Not a glitch. Not a delay. Not a coincidence. A pattern. And patterns? Terrify people like Evelyn Carter. Because patterns mean one thing. Então, adopt, patruzeti shishaptea. Everything shifted. A transfer, large. Routine, pre-approved. Time-sensitive. Didn't go through. Not delayed. Not pending. Paused. That word spread faster than anything else. Paused? What do you mean paused? That's not even an option. Voices sharpened. Chairs moved. Screens refreshed again and again. As if repetition would fix it. Because in their world, things don't hesitate. They execute. Or they fail. But this felt like something was deciding. And that was new. That was dangerous. Within minutes, the room changed. Not louder, tighter. Because now, people weren't just reacting. They were watching. Waiting for someone to take control. But no one did. Because no one knew how. Daniel called again. No delay this time. No build-up. Fix this. Not a question. Not anger. Urgency. Ralph. Unfiltered. I answered slower. Let him sit inside the silence. Just long enough to feel the loss of control. I don't work for you, I said. Silence. Then, his voice dropped. Lower. More controlled. More dangerous. This is bigger than you? I almost smiled. It always was. He exhaled sharply. You're hurting the company. Payments are freezing. Approvals are conflicting. People are asking questions. Good, I said. That word landed wrong. Because it wasn't defensive. It was intentional. That's not how this works. He snapped. It is now. And then, I ended the call. This time, he didn't call back. Because now, it wasn't about fixing the problem. It was about surviving it. Inside Carter Holdings, Evelyn didn't hesitate. She moved. Lock it down. Access tightened. Departments isolated. Internal systems segmented. Like she was sealing a breach. But the breach wasn't external. It was already inside. What am I not seeing? She asked. The room stayed silent. Because that question isn't meant to be answered. It's meant to expose fear. Trace everything, she ordered. And they did. Layer by layer. Connection by connection. Deeper. More invasive. Less controlled. Until they found it again. That layer. Still there. Still intact. Still untouchable. And still attached to me. That's when the room shifted. Not in volume. In alignment. Because now, this wasn't technical. This was structural. You let her build this? Evelyn asked. No one responded. Because no one wanted to be responsible for something they never understood. Atunci prezece. 20 și 6. The first external crack appeared. And this time, they couldn't contain it. A partner transfer failed. Not internal. External. Visible. Public. The kind of failure that doesn't stay in a room. The kind that travels. What happened? Why wasn't this executed? Is there a problem with your system? The questions came fast. Too fast. Because once external trust is shaken, it doesn't wait. It reacts. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. For the first time, she couldn't. Because control requires certainty. And certainty was gone. We're handling it, she said finally. Measured, but thinner now. Less absolute. Because this time, she didn't fully believe it. By noon, the calls started. Not from inside, from outside. Partners, advisors, stakeholders, the kind of people who don't ask questions unless something is already wrong. And then, it escalated. Someone leaked it. Not everything. Just enough. A screenshot. Authorization conflict. Delay marker. System hesitation. No explanation. No narrative. Just proof. And proof moves faster than control. Within an hour, it spread. Private chats. Closed networks. Industry threads. Places Evelyn couldn't reach. Places she couldn't silence. And suddenly, her system didn't look perfect anymore. At 2. 14 plazar. She called me again. No pause this time. No performance. What do you want? There it was. The real question. Not control. Not dominance. Negotiation. I leaned back slowly. Because that shift was everything. You took everything from me. I said, a pause. So I took something back. That's not how this works, she said. It is now. Silence. But not controlled silence. Unstable silence. You're damaging yourself, she said. No, I replied. I'm revealing you. And then, I ended the call. By late afternoon, the shift was undeniable. Not dramatic, but irreversible. People hesitated. Before approving, before confirming, before trusting, because doubt had entered the system. And once doubt enters, everything slows down. Everything. Evelyn didn't slow down. She pushed harder. Emergency meetings. Internal pressure. More restrictions. But pressure does something dangerous? It reveals structure. And structure was exactly what I wanted exposed. At 4:32 The second crack hit. Bigger. A scheduled deal. Collapsed. Not delayed. Collapsed. Because one approval didn't pass. One layer didn't respond. And suddenly, Million stopped moving. The room broke. This is unacceptable. How is this even possible? Fix it. And for the first time, Evelyn Carter raised her voice. Not controlled, not measured. And that was the moment everything changed. Because now, it wasn't about control anymore. It was about survival. I opened my laptop. Not to fix anything. To watch. Because this still wasn't revenge. Not fully. This was escalation. This was exposure. In motion. And the best part? I still hadn't gone public. Not yet. Which meant everything they were experiencing was only the beginning. This story contains fictionalized elements for entertainment and educational purposes. By the end of the week, Evelyn stopped containing it. She escalated. Not quietly, not internally, publicly, deliberately. And this time, she made sure I couldn't stay invisible. The email went out at 6:58 a.m. Subject line: Emergency Structural Review. Mandatory attendance. Mandatory. Not optional. Not selective. Mandatory. And my name was on the list. Not as a contributor. Not as a consultant. As a liability. I stared at it for a second. Not surprised. Just confirming. Because this was predictable. Evelyn doesn't solve problems quietly. She redefines them. And then, she assigns them a face. This time, that face was mine. I almost smiled. Because she thought, this would end it. She thought, if she brought me into a room again, in front of the right people, under the right framing, she could do the same thing. Control the narrative. Control the outcome. Control me. She was wrong. The room was different this time. Bigger. Brighter. More exposed. Glass walls. City skyline stretching behind it. Natural light pouring in, like transparency. But nothing about that room felt open. It felt staged. Deliberately visible. Like a place designed for people to watch things happen. People were already there when I arrived. Legal, finance, external advisors, and a few faces I didn't recognize. That told me everything. Witnesses. She didn't just want control. She wanted validation. She wanted people to see me fail, so they would believe it. Evelyn stood at the far end of the table. Not sitting. Positioned. Like she was anchoring the entire room. She didn't acknowledge me when I walked in. Of course she didn't. Acknowledgement gives weight, and she wasn't ready to give me that, so I walked in, sat down, and waited. Because patience is louder than defense. Let's begin, she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that requires effort. This situation did not appear overnight. A pause. It developed under inadequate oversight. Eyes shifted. Not randomly. Directed. Toward me. Exactly as planned. I accepted responsibility. She continued. Another pause. Because I allowed someone unqualified. A slight tilt of her head. To operate beyond her depth. There it was. Clean. Controlled. Cruel. She lacked discipline. A beat. She lacked consistency. Another. She lacked value. Each word. Slower. Sharper. Designed. To define me. Before I could speak. Then, the screen lit up. And this time, she didn't hold back. Emails. Message. Internal logs. Every fragment. Cut precisely. To build a version of me that didn't exist. She introduced risk. Evelyn said, walking slowly across the room. She destabilized critical systems. Another step. And now, she stopped. Turned. Fully. We're cleaning it up. Silence. Heavy. Because this was the moment she had constructed. The moment where I was supposed to break. Explain. Defend. React. Explain. She said. Not a question. A comment. The room stilled. Every eye. Ome. Waiting. I didn't move. Didn't rush. Didn't react. I just looked at her. And smiled. Small. Controlled. Enough. And that was the first disruption, because that wasn't part of her structure. I don't think that's necessary, I said. The room shifted instantly. Not loudly, but sharply, because I had just done something no one in that room had ever done. I dismissed her. Evelyn didn't react immediately. Of course she didn't. She recalibrated. This is not optional, she said. No, I replied. You're right. A pause. Then I leaned forward. But if we're discussing instability, I let the silence stretch. Long enough for attention to tighten. Maybe we should start with the system. That changed everything. Not visibly, but completely. Evelyn didn't interrupt. She assessed, adjusted, and then she made her mistake. Pull it up. Confident. Immediate, because she still believed the system would support her. The screen shifted. Live data, authorization layers, transaction flows. Everything she thought she controlled. Walk us through the failure? She said, but the man at the screen hesitated. Just for a second. But in a room like that, 1 second is everything. There's a conflict, he said. Resolve it, Evelyn replied. We're trying. Trying. That word didn't belong in her world. Why isn't it resolving? Someone asked. Silence. Then, something appeared. Deeper. Hidden. A layer. Not usually visible. Ownership structure. Embedded. Locked. And next to it, a name. This time, the room reacted. Not loudly, but unmistakably. Eyes moved. From the screen, to me. And suddenly, I wasn't the problem anymore. I was a variable. An unknown. Something they hadn't accounted for. Evelyn didn't turn immediately. She didn't need to. She already understood. You embedded yourself, she said. Quiet. Measured. Not accusation. Recognition. I built what you ignored, I replied. And this time, I didn't hide the smile. Not wide. Just enough for everyone to see. The shift had started. You said I lacked value? I continued. I stood, slowly. No rush. No pressure. But this system, I glanced at the screen, doesn't seem to agree. A few people shifted in their seats, because now, this wasn't control anymore. This was contradiction. You don't control it. Someone said, not to me. To her. Silence. Heavy. Because that question wasn't supposed to exist. Evelyn finally turned. Fully. For the first time. She looked at me. Like I mattered. And that was everything. You're implying ownership. Another voice said, I'm stating it, I replied. And then, I reached into my bag. But I didn't take anything out. Not yet. Because timing still mattered. Because this wasn't the reveal. Not yet. This was pressure. Measured. Controlled. Public. And the room, I could feel it. Not understanding it fully, but sensing something had shifted. Something real. Something structural. And for the first time, since this started, Evelyn Carter wasn't leading the room anymore. She was reacting to it. And that was the beginning of her fall. The room didn't move. That was the first sign. Not confusion. Not chaos. Stillness. Because something had just shifted. And no one wanted to be the first to react to it wrong. The screen remained frozen. That layer, still visible, still locked, still undeniable. And next to it, my name. No blur. No ambiguity. Clear. Permanent. Evelyn didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because at that level, words don't regain control. Only structure does. And her structure was cracking. You're implying ownership? The man across the table said. Careful. Measured. Like he already knew the answer. But needed it confirmed. I'm not implying anything, I said. My voice didn't rise. Didn't sharpen. Because truth doesn't need emphasis. I'm stating it. Silence. He looked at the screen again, then back at me. And you're saying... What exactly? Another voice asked. I didn't answer immediately. Because timing was still everything. Because this wasn't just about being right. It was about making them understand they had been wrong the entire time. So I reached into my bag. Slowly. No rush. Because movement draws attention. And right now, attention was power. I pulled out the document. Simple. Unremarkable. Until it wasn't. I placed it on the table. No sound. But every eye followed it. Because instinctively, they knew. This mattered. The lawyer took it first. Of course he did. Because validation has to come from authority. He glanced at it once. Then again. Slower this time. Careful. More precise. Because now, this wasn't routine. This was risk. This clause, he said, then stopped. Just for a second, and that second was enough. Because hesitation, from someone like him, means something is wrong. Grants independent control authority? The room tightened. Not visibly, but enough to a non-executive entity. Another pause. Longer. And that entity is… He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. At present, a breath. It is her. Nothing. No reaction. No noise. Because real impact doesn't explode. It freezes. The chairman leaned forward. You're confirming that she… He stopped. Because even saying it out loud felt wrong. Has control over the system? No. I said, clear. And that made it worse. I'm saying I always did. That landed. Harder than anything else. Because it didn't introduce power. It exposed ignorance. And ignorance, at that level, is unforgivable. The room shifted. Subtly, but completely. Not toward me. Away from her. You let her build this? Someone asked. Not to me. To Evan. And for the first time, she didn't answer. Not because she couldn't. Because any answer would damage her more. You said I lacked value. I continued. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. But this entire system… I glanced at the screen. Depends on me. A few people shifted in their seats. Because now, this wasn't accusation. This was dependency. You didn't disclose this. Another voice said. Again. Not to me. To her. Evelyn finally spoke. You embedded this without authorization? Her voice was steady, controlled, but thinner. Because now, she wasn't leading. She was defending. I didn't hide it. I said. I leaned forward slightly. Just enough. You didn't read it? Silence. Heavy. Sharp. Because that line, I didn't just explain the situation. It defined it. This wasn't sabotage. This was negligence. And negligence destroys authority faster than failure ever could. The lawyer spoke again. This document is valid. No hesitation this time. No uncertainty. Just final. And that was it. That was the moment. Everything broke. Not loudly. Not visibly. Structurally. Because once something is validated, it can't be dismissed. You're saying we don't control the system? Someone asked. No. I said. I stood, measured. You never did. That shifted everything. Because now, this wasn't about losing control. It was about realizing you never had it. Evelyn looked at me. Fully. For the first time. Without calculation. Without distance. Just recognition. You planned this? She said. Quiet. Not anger. Understanding. I prepared for you. I replied. And that was worse. Because planning implies aggression. Preparation implies inevitability. The room didn't belong to her anymore. You could feel it. In the silence. In the hesitation. In the way people stopped looking at her. For direction. Because direction requires trust. And trust was gone. What happens if she withdraws access? Someone asked. That question changed everything. Because now, I wasn't the problem. I was the risk. Evelyn didn't answer. She couldn't. Because the answer was unacceptable. I let the silence stretch. Long enough? Then I spoke. I'm not here to destroy anything. A pause. I'm here to correct it. That word, écoute, because it mirrored hers. Only this time, it meant something real. I picked up the document. Didn't hand it back. Didn't leave it behind. Because control isn't just about having something It's about choosing when others can see it. You wanted an explanation? I said. I looked around the room. At every face. At every shift. At every realization. Now you have one. No one stopped me. When I turned, because no one knew, if they could. Behind me, no voices followed, no commands, no corrections, just silence, because something had just happened that no one in that room had ever experienced before. Evelyn Carter lost control, not gradually, all at once, and this time, everyone saw it. But this still wasn't the end, because losing control in a room is one thing, losing it in the world? That's something else entirely. And that part was coming next. By the next morning, I didn't exist. Not metaphorically. Systematically. My credentials. Revoked. My access. Terminated. My name. Removed from internal directories. Even my email. Returned nothing. Like I had never been there. Clean. Efficient. Professional. Evelyn Carter was responding. And she wasn't reacting emotionally. She was executing. Because people like her don't fight chaos, they erase it. The first message came at 9:12 a.m. Internal memo. Subject line. Operational stability notice. Short, controlled, and precise. Recent irregularities have been identified and resolved. Unauthorized system configurations have been removed. All operations are now secure. Unauthorized. That word was deliberate because it reframed everything, not as negligence, not as oversight, as intrusion, as threat, as me. I almost smiled because she was doing exactly what I expected. She wasn't denying what happened. She was redefining it. And if you control the definition, you control the outcome. At least, that's what she believed. By noon, it escalated. Legal notices. Not subtle. Not exploratory. Direct. Breach of internal protocol. Unauthorized system interference. Potential legal exposure. Words designed not to prove guilt, but to establish it. Because once something is written that way, people stop questioning it. They start accepting it. That's how power works. But she moved too fast. And speed creates mistakes. Because while she was cleaning the surface, she forgot something. Structures don't disappear just because you remove the name. The system didn't collapse. It didn't break. It didn't even slow down. It adapted. Quietly. Subtly. Exactly the way I built it to. Because control was never tied to identity. It was tied to design. And design can't be erased. Atoy? 13:67 m. The first external ripple hit. A call. Not from inside. From outside. A partner. Concerned. Confused. There's a discrepancy, he said. Of course there was, because when you remove the architect, without understanding the architecture, things don't stop. They misalign. And misalignment spreads. 10. Another. Then another. Small at first. Barely noticeable. But cumulative. Dangerous. And somewhere inside that building, Evelyn knew. Because people like her. I feel instability before they see it. But this time, she couldn't locate it. Because this wasn't a bug. It wasn't an error. It was absence. And absence is harder to fix than failure. Achinch doi. The emergency call went out. Again. But this time, not to expose me. To fix something she didn't understand. I wasn't invited. Of course I wasn't. I had been erased. But that didn't matter. Because presence isn't always physical. And control isn't always visible. Inside that room, they were already behind. What's causing it? Someone asked. No answer. Why isn't it stabilizing? Silence. Didn't we remove the issue? That question hung in the air, because now the narrative was starting to crack. And cracks spread. Evelyn didn't panic. She redirected. Isolate the modules. Comment? Immediate. Because isolation creates control. Or at least, the illusion of it. But the system didn't respond the way she expected. Because it wasn't designed to be isolated. It was designed to reconnect, and every attempt to separate it made it more unstable. Not dramatically, not visibly, but enough for doubt to start forming, and doubt in a room like that is fatal. Bisześć 15. The first real consequence appeared. A delay. Public facing. Small. But visible. And visibility changes everything, because internal problems can be managed. External ones. And have witnesses. Atshase 22. Someone said the word. Media. Almost like they didn't want it to be real, but it was. Because once something leaves the building, it doesn't belong to you anymore. Evelyn stood still, not frozen, calculating. Because this was the moment. Everything shifts. Not internally, externally, and external pressure can't be rewritten. It has to be handled carefully, precisely, or it explodes. Prepare a statement, she said. Controlled, but thinner now. Because control was no longer absolute. It was conditional. And conditions change. Meanwhile, I did nothing. No calls. No statements. No reactions. Because this part was never about me acting. It was about her. Overcorrecting. Overreaching. Overexposing. And every move she made pushed things further into the open. By night, the narrative had split. Internally, I was the problem. Externally, something was wrong. And those two things don't stay separate for long, because eventually, someone connects them. And when they do, the question changes. Not what happened, but who lied? And that question destroys everything. I looked at my phone. Unread messages, unknown numbers, requests. Not threats anymore. Requests. Because now, they needed something. Only I had. But I didn't answer. Not yet. Because timing still mattered. Because the next move wasn't internal. It wasn't controlled. It wasn't quiet. It was public. And when it happens, there's no coming back. Not for her. Not for them. And definitely not for the story they tried to create. I put the phone down. And for the first time since all of this started, I let myself breathe. Because the system was doing exactly what it was designed to do. And tomorrow, everyone would see it. By morning, it was no longer internal. It couldn't be. Because once something leaks, it stops belonging to the people who created it and starts belonging to everyone watching. The room was different this time. Not just bigger, exposed, deliberately. Because now, there were observers. Not just executives. Not just legal. External auditors. Advisors. And most importantly, people who didn't answer to Evelyn Carter. That changed everything. Because control only works when everyone in the room depends on you. And this time, they didn't. She was already there when I walked in. Of course she was. Standing. Same position. Same posture. But not the same presence. Because presence comes from certainty. And certainty was gone. For the first time, Evelyn Carter looked like someone. Waiting. Not controlling. Waiting. I didn't rush. Didn't hesitate. Just walked in. Like I belonged there. Because now, I did. No one stopped me. No one questioned me. Because after yesterday, they couldn't. Let's proceed. The chairman said. Not her. Him. That alone was the shift. She didn't lead the room anymore. The room moved without her. The screen lit up. But this time, it wasn't her presentation. It wasn't curated. It wasn't controlled. It was raw. Live system activity. And it didn't look stable. It didn't look clean. It looked dependent. Can you explain this? The auditor asked. Not aggressive. Precise. Targeted. He wasn't asking for a story. He was asking for truth. Evelyn stepped forward. Of course she did. This is the result of unauthorized structural interference. By whom? He interrupted. Sharp. Clean. No room to redirect. A pause. Short. But visible. Because now, naming me wasn't enough. Not anymore. She turned slightly, not fully, just enough to acknowledge me for the first time in front of everyone. Hair, she said. No emotion, just placement, assignment. And this time, it didn't land the way she expected. Because the room didn't react, they evaluated, which is worse. The auditor looked at me. Is that accurate? Simple question. Clean. Final. I didn't answer immediately. Because this was the moment, the one you don't rush, the one you build, the one that defines everything after it. So I stepped forward. Not fast, not slow, controlled, measured. And then I asked the only question that mattered. If I'm the problem, I let the silence stretch. Not empty, tight, focused. Why does everything break when I'm gone? Silence. Real silence. The kind that doesn't need to be described. Because everyone in that room felt it. Not confusion. Realization. Because that question doesn't accuse, it exposes. No one answered. Because no one could. The auditor turned back to the screen. Then to Evelyn. You removed her access? Yes. And the instability began, after that? A pause. Then, yes. That was it. That was the collapse. Not dramatic. Not loud, but irreversible. Because once cause and effect, a line in front of witnesses. You can't rewrite it. You said she created the issue. The auditor continued. But removing her made it worse. Another pause. Longer. More dangerous. Explain that. This time, Evelyn didn't answer. Because any answer would confirm the truth. And silence sometimes does it faster. The chairman leaned forward. So let's clarify. He said. Too calm. You removed the person tied to the system. He glanced at the screen. And now the system is destabilizing. He looked directly at her. Do you understand what that implies? That question wasn't technical. It was structural. And for the first time, Evelyn Carter had no structure left. I acted to protect the company, she said. Careful. Measured. But it was weaker. Because it wasn't control. It was defense. And now? The auditor asked. Simple. Brutal. She didn't answer. Because now, every option cost her something. Reinstating me meant admitting she was wrong. Refusing meant risking collapse. And in a room like that, indecision is fatal. I didn't interrupt. Didn't push. Because pressure was already doing the work. You built this? The auditor asked. This time, to me. Yes. And you can stabilize it? A pause. Not hesitation. Choice. Because now, I wasn't proving anything. I was deciding. Yes. I said. That shifted the room again. Not toward me. Toward resolution. Because suddenly, I wasn't a variable anymore. I was the only solution. And that is power. Then why haven't you? Someone asked. I looked at Evelyn. Directly. Fully. No distance. No filter. Because this was the final moment. The one that closes the loop. The one that pays everything off. Because she removed me. Silence. Again, but different this time. Heavier. Because now, it wasn't just realization. It was responsibility. And responsibility has direction. All eyes moved to her. Not questioning. Not analyzing. Waiting. Because now, the room needed an answer. Not from me. From her. And she didn't have one. That was it. That was the moment. Evelyn Carter lost everything. In front of everyone. Not her title. Not yet. Something worse. Her authority. And once that's gone, everything else follows. No one said it out loud. They didn't need to. Because everyone in that room understood exactly what just happened. And none of it was in her control anymore. I stepped back. Not claiming the room. Not taking the spotlight. Because real power doesn't need to be seen. It just needs to be undeniable. And now, it was. This story contains fictionalized elements for entertainment and educational purposes. The room didn't recover. Not immediately, not after that. Because once authority breaks, It doesn't rebuild in the same place. It relocates. And this time, it didn't relocate to Evelyn Carter. It moved. Away from her. Quietly. Permanently. No one announced it. No vote. No declaration. Just subtle shifts. People stopped looking at her. For direction. Stopped waiting. For her to speak. Stopped assuming. She was in control. And that's how power ends. Not with noise. With absence. The chairman stood. We'll suspend all executive authority on this matter, he said. Neutral. Professional. Final. And proceed with independent oversight until stabilization is confirmed. Independent. That word cut deeper than anything else. Because it meant she was no longer trusted to manage her own system. Evelyn didn't argue. Of course she didn't. Because arguing requires leverage. And she had none left. Not here. Not anymore. The auditor turned to me. We'll need your cooperation moving forward. Not a request. An acknowledgement of relevance, of necessity, of control. I'll consider it, I said. And that shifted everything again. Because now, they weren't deciding anymore. I was. Evelyn noticed. Of course she did. Because people like her always recognize the moment they lose power, even if they pretend not to. This isn't over, she said. Not loud, not emotional, just quiet, controlled, but thinner now, because control was all she had left, and even that was slipping. I looked at her, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just clarity. It already is. No emphasis, no need, because the room had already decided. She just hadn't accepted it yet. I didn't stay, didn't linger, didn't wait for the aftermath. Because endings like this don't need witnesses. They need distance. As I walked out, no one stopped me. Not because they couldn't, because they wouldn't, because now, I wasn't the problem. I was the solution. They had tried to remove, and failed. The building felt different. Same structure, same glass, same view, but lighter, like something had been removed. Not physically, structurally. By the time I reached my phone, it had already begun. Message. Not threats. Not accusation. Offers. Careful. Measured. Respectful. Because the narrative had changed. Completely. I didn't open them. Not yet. Because I didn't need to. Because the outcome was already decided. Later that week, the announcement came. Short. Clean. Unavoidable. Evelyn Carter will be stepping down from her role. Effective immediately. No details. No explanation. Because explanations create questions. And questions lead to truth. They didn't want that. But it didn't matter. Because the truth had already been seen by the only people that mattered. No scandal. No headlines. No spectacle. Just removal. Quiet. Precise. Complete. And that was worse. Because she couldn't fight it. Couldn't spin it. Couldn't control it. The system had rejected her. The same system she thought she owned. I never spoke publicly. Never corrected the narrative. Never clarified anything. Because I didn't need to. Silence was enough. Because the right people already knew. And the rest would figure it out. Eventually, I stood by the window that evening. City lights stretching below. Same view. Different weight. Because this time, nothing was unresolved. No loose ends. No unfinished business. Just closure. Not loud. Not dramatic. Complete. I picked up my phone. Scrolled once. Paused. Then set it down again. Because for the first time, since all of this started, there was nothing left to respond to. Nothing left to prove. Nothing left to fix. Just one quiet truth. Settling into place. They thought I had no power. They thought I was replaceable. They thought they could remove me, and everything would stay the same. They were wrong, because I was never part of the system. I was the part they didn't understand. And in the end, that was the only part that mattered.
This content is entirely fictional. Any similarity to real persons or events is coincidental. This video is not news, not a documentary. It is presented for creative storytelling purpose only. AI-assisted production.